Brady Schwind, thank you for being with us today. I think of you as the champion of the Lost Art of Oz project, and now you're becoming the author of The Lost Art of Oz as a book. Can you
Yes.
tell us a little bit about that process, how you've come to be writing this book for us?
Well, I think what's interesting when it comes to the Oz art, I think it's the one area in Oz academia that's really not been explored. When we talk about the artwork created for Denslow, created by Denslow and by Neil and by Frank Kramer and Dick Martin and Dirk for the original series, that is something that's just not been explored. Right. And what I found was there was a really interesting story there. And the story really is that most of this artwork that is a big part, I think, of what made the books iconic and that sparked the imagination for so many people. Most of this artwork is missing. And it's missing for different reasons, but it's mostly missing because at the time it was not valued as art. It was utilitarian art to draw illustrations in children's books. And this was before anybody had any idea that The Wizard of Oz was going to become what it has become. But it was also before the children's literature market was really solidified. The Oz books in this country are what changed not only the way children's books were made and certainly the way they were illustrated, but how they were marketed, and they created a market that really was not there before. So going back 100 years ago, no one really thought to keep this art and to preserve it. And so I guess I was one of the first people that thought I'm going to go out there and really try to find out where this stuff has gone to the degree that I can, and to learn about not only the artist, but the people that have been the custodians of the art along the way is what I found to be just as interesting a story. It must be said, as magnificent as the Oz book illustrations are, if you've not seen what the original artwork looked like, you've not experienced them. Like any art, you've just not experienced it until you've seen what it looks like. So the goal of the book, of course, is partly to create a beautiful kind of coffee table type of book that will finally preserve for audiences this original artwork, and will hopefully be a long-awaited testament to some of these illustrators that have for 100 years deserved this. But again, it will be this interesting story about the search for the artwork, and as the Wizard of Oz reminds us, the people you meet along the journey are so interesting.
So are you finding this artwork in private collections, framed and hanging on walls, or are you somewhere in a storage unit with a flashlight looking into books?
A little bit of both. That the artwork, which again, Riley and Lee really didn't retain. And so it got out for a bunch of different reasons or by a bunch of different methods. I think certainly some of it was just not kept, and the organization moved a number of times. And I think they didn't always take the artwork with them. They didn't see the validity in holding on to 4,000 drawings when the books were all said and done. So some of it was thrown away, but some of it was also lent out at the time. This was a popular way to market the books, was to send out the illustrations, and they would put them in window displays or in bookstores, and that was a way to promote the books. And it was supposed to be returned, but oftentimes it wasn't. And then I think there were a lot of people that probably unofficially helped themselves to some of the stuff that was in the archive. And we know that the people that ran the company were generous with the artwork as well. So some of it I'm finding in collections that people have had for years, and some of it you're finding in storage drawers. My favorite recent story is a gentleman that reached out on my website who said, we've had this drawing for as long as I can remember. It's been in a drawer, and it's been something we've carted around house to house with the bits of string and tape and stuff you would have in a junk drawer. And my granddaughter thinks it looks a little bit Wizard of Oz like, is what she said. And he sent me an image, and it ended up being one of Denslow's original drawings for one of the color plates in The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. I mean, and to be still discovering something like that 120 years later is really exciting. And it kind of gives me hope that there's just more stuff out there that's waiting to be discovered. So part of this conversation is, too, it's honoring some of those early historians of Oz, like Dick Martin and some of the early Oz Club members, Irene Fisher, and some of those people that were the first to rescue it and to preserve it and to try to make it available to other people to enjoy. So it's their journey too.
wonderful story about the Denslow piece. Have
Yeah.
you uncovered any truly lost Neil art that we did not realize had survived that might have a fun story to share?
I always say this is a process of discovery and rediscovery, because sometimes we know stuff existed, but then we haven't known where it's been for 50, 60 years. So then it's not a sure thing that it still exists. One of my favorite things, and I think I saw you the day after I had gone to visit, was rediscovering what we call the Lufkin Collection. Which was Mrs. Lufkin was a wealthy New York socialite that commissioned John Arneal to do a number of Oz pieces, including a very large Oz mural. And she also had several color plate watercolors for Emerald City of Oz that John Arneal had done. That was kind of how she got interested in his art anyway. But we really didn't know what had happened to them. They kind of had fallen off the radar. And, now you're talking about the grandkids having the artwork. And I was able to track them down and to go and visit it. And it's wonderful to see. I would say that was one particularly neat cache of things that to rediscover. We thought it was out there, but we hadn't seen it a long time.
Wasn't one of the Oz books dedicated to the Lufkins?
It was interesting. So John Arneal had a really close relationship with the Lufkin family. And I think it partly came from the fact that he was a patron of theirs. I mean, they were patrons of his work, I should say. And this was in the early 30s when times were hard, and he had 3 college-age girls. And I think the commissions that she hired him to do, I think must have meant a great deal to him financially. And he gifted her a number of things, a number of artifacts, which are very interesting. And then he dedicated Wonder City of Oz to her. But some of the things that he even gave to the family, which I think, people would be intrigued by, or some of the original, when Neil would get a manuscript, a typed manuscript from, say, Ruth Plumley Thompson, he would begin just sketching on it right away, his ideas, and in pencil, right on the manuscript. And a lot of these drawings ended up pretty much transferring over into the book. And he gave Mrs. Lufkin a number of those manuscripts with his drawings all over them. And he even gave the Lufkin family his copy of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz that L. Frank Baum had given him in 1904 when he came on to illustrate his first Oz book, The Marvelous Land of Oz. So just a wonderful treasure trove there. And again, this is that the family didn't necessarily understand the significance of all of it, but they treasure it as a legacy piece for their grandmother at this point. So it's wonderful. It's wonderful sometimes to remind the heirs of their history. And stuff does continue to pop up. Some drawings popped up at auction a couple of years ago that were from The Scarecrow in Oz. And that's a book that previously no artwork was thought to survive. So I don't know. I mean, Jane, I hope always springs eternal. I'm waiting for the person to ring me up and come to my doorstep with the entire sleeve of Dorothy and the Wizard and Oz drawings. I think it could happen. One of the real mysteries really is like those, the merry-go-round drawings, because you know that Dick, if he had kept them, he was a collector of art himself. So it's strange that they are not accounted for. Either he turned them into the publisher and they didn't retain them, or I wouldn't be surprised if he gave them to someone, but we don't know who. It's not, the Hollisters have the pencil sketches, but that's not what would have been in the book.
You mentioned a website, and you also have a blog. Tell people how they can follow your stories.
Well, I have a website called The Lost Art of Oz. It's www.lostartofoz.com. And we do blogs, and of course, we're on social media as well. And they can learn about the project. And certainly, if anyone has original artwork, I think that that's a big part of this journey too. Aside from the joy of going out there and finding it, there is a real academic point to this, which is to definitively catalog what exists, because it's important to know what exists and to kind of track and know where it is and where it's ended up. And no one has done that before either. So there might be people that are watching this that bought a drawing at an Oz convention in 1965, and we'd love to hear from you too, because it's just valuable for us to know, from a academic perspective, what exists.
Certainly. Do you have any kind of an estimated timeline at this point for when I might have this book in my hand or my coffee
Well,
table.
I have my little, this is like a little prototype that's just, it really is kind of something that was created to kind of shop around and show people what the idea could be. And we do have, I can't disclose the details yet, but we do have a publisher that is interested in it. And it would coincide with something else that they've got going on. So hopefully, as these things go, within the next couple of years, that's always how with the book deal and with the publishing thing, it's never next week. It's always by season. So, but I'm optimistic that it will be sooner than later.
Wonderful. Well, I am certainly glad that you have entered the realm of nonfiction Oz writers to bring this work together for us. As a collector myself, I really look forward to having it. And I know so many of the people who've had this artwork through the years that it's, almost it's visiting with friends for me to even think about them sharing their stories.
Absolutely. And I really do have to just thank you officially here and now for being so supportive and for really being the first person that was the guardian of the gates that began opening the doors for me and saying, you might reach out to this person, you might touch base with this person. And I think it's been fun too, because this has been a project that has kind of brought everyone together because everyone knows it's a good idea, knows it should be done. And it's truly coming from a place of love, a love of Oz and a love particularly for these artists that I think we all feel just have never quite been recognized the way that they deserve. And hopefully this will be one step of many to help keep their memory alive.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being with us. Again, I just really look forward to reading the book, and I appreciate so much the work that you've done.
Thank you.